What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with my college football preseason power rankings 25 through 1. Let's get into it here. Starting at 25, I got Iowa. Iowa, they've been great the last 3 or 4 years, ever since the COVID year. They've been awesome. They just got those tampering allegations for Cade McNamara. So their head coach is going to be out for week 1, but not really too much of a blow. But this team comes into the year, needs to figure out their offense. Defense is going to be great. Special teams is going to be great. But if this team can average more than 3 touchdowns a game, average 21 or more points a game, there's a good chance that they'll be looking at 10 wins and possibly a chance at a Big Ten championship and even a college football playoff berth. 24, I have NC State. The Wolfpack has a tough schedule this year, but I think they can manage. The big ad for them is going to be Coastal Carolina transfer quarterback Grayson McCall. He's going to be great. I think, he's been great at Coastal Carolina. And NC State feels like that's what they've been missing in the big time games. And the Tennessee and at Clemson, those two toughest games, I think McCall will be more than ready to answer the call for that game. 23, I have Louisville. Louisville's a team in the ACC that I think could make a run. They got Austin Peay week 1, should be a blowout there. The defense should be great again. And I think this Louisville team could really make some noise in the ACC. There's a team every year in the ACC that we don't know too much about or that is kind of towards this part of the rankings at the middle 20s or really around the 20s. Louisville's going to be that team for me this year that I think in the ACC could really make some noise. At 22, I have Kansas. Lance Leopold has this program just on fire right now. Who knows what's going to go well for Kansas here? It shouldn't be Jason Bean. It should be Jalen Daniels. Jalen Daniels, is he going to have another big year? I don't know what, this Kansas team holds for the rest. I'm looking at their schedule right here. Their 3 toughest games probably at West Virginia is a tough game, at Kansas State, and then at Baylor at the end of the year. But other than that, I really don't see too much of a challenge. They got very, very lucky. They don't have to play Oklahoma State or Arizona, or Utah. So really, if you look at their schedule, they don't play the top 3 teams in the conference going into the year. And if Kansas can, I think, go 9-3, there's a good chance that they might squeak into the playoff this year. Miami is another team that I think a lot of people are talking about. It's a big year for Mario Cristobal, and that's because Cam Ward and Damian Martinez are looking to take this team to the promised land. Now, I'm not saying win the ACC championship, win it all. They're just hoping to get to the playoff at this point. Miami, they're due. It seems like they are due for a good year. If you look at their schedule here, I'm looking at it right now. Miami, the Florida game week 1 is always a tough game, but they have Louisville, Florida State, Syracuse would be their 3 toughest conference games. It's definitely right there on the table for Miami. They just got to go and produce. 20, we got Texas A&M. Week 1, they're starting off with a doozy. Notre Dame at home. It is a favorable matchup because it is at home of the 12th man in College Station. But they win that game, I'm sure they're on cloud 9 going into the rest of the year. Lose that one, I don't know what's going to happen because, the SEC is just a gauntlet at this point. And if you lose this game to Notre Dame at home, I think you're dropping out of the rankings, at least my rankings, and we might not see A&M again just because how tough their schedule is. 19 is Kansas State. And Kansas State, they got one of the toughest Big 12 schedules, but they all are at home with Arizona, Oklahoma State, and Kansas. And it's going to be Avery Johnson leading the show. With, Will Howard's transfer to Ohio State, Avery Johnson gets this step up and really lead this program. And I think they could, be that Big 12 team that's fighting for that last playoff spot. Arizona, another Big 12 team. Same thing for them. They got 2 tough games. It's in early September, which, they always say it's better to lose early than late. And it's at Kansas State and at Utah. Then after that, Arizona could coast possibly to a 9-win season. Noah Fifta and Teratola McMillan probably going to be one of the scariest duos to stop this year in college football. And I expect this Arizona team to really light it up after what we saw late last year. 17 is Oklahoma State, and this team is going to ride and die by Ollie Gordon III. Ollie Gordon, probably going to be one of the top Heisman favorites coming into the year and probably one of the best running backs coming into the year. And it's going to all ride on him. If he has a terrific season like last year, I expect this Oklahoma State team probably right there around 9-10 wins, just like a lot of these other teams. but they're also in the same boat. Utah at Kansas State in late September, two of their toughest games early in the year. And let's say they go 1-1 there. There's a good chance that this team might finish 11-1 and be, a single digit seed heading into the playoff. Oklahoma, now I think 16 is a fair ranking for them. They did lose Gabriel, and obviously Gabriel's gone to Oregon. So Jackson Arnold is looking to be the next homegrown quarterback at Oklahoma. And I think this team might be due for a step back. I'm not saying that just because, they're moving to the SEC. I'm saying that just because of their schedule. If you look at Oklahoma's schedule, first three should be, a little tricky, but I don't think they're going to lose with Temple, Houston, and Tulane. But welcome to the SEC. First game, you get Tennessee at home at Auburn. Then you got the Red River Showdown against Texas, Ole Miss on the road, Missouri on the road. Then you get Alabama and LSU to finish the year. I mean, I don't know. I think this team might be around a 6-6 ball club when it's all said and done. Clemson at 15. Their biggest story heading into this year, are they going to be able to get back on top of the ACC? FSU, NC State, those teams are right there at the top along with Louisville. And I think, this week 1 game is really going to prove how we are going to view this Clemson team. They're going against Georgia, and the last time they played didn't end too well for them. It was the defensive battle. Offense couldn't get anything going. They lost on a pick six pretty much. And Clemson with Cade Klubnik, they're going to have to show out week 1, at least get some respect, I think, from a lot of people. Let's say they lose this one by a touchdown and it's 38-31. They're putting up points, but just couldn't get it done. I think Clemson will be right here when it's all said and done after week 1, but that's a tall task for them. 14 is Tennessee. Tennessee, I think this team, the sky's the limit for them. Nico Imilileva, I think that's how you say it, gets his shot to be a quarterback after Milton departs. And, he's going to be the guy for the next few years. Week 1 should be no problem. But the at NC State game, Tennessee, NC State, that's a big game early on in the year. And especially with them being in the SEC, I think that's a very, very tricky game to go about. Because if you lose that one, I don't want to say the pressure's on heading into the SEC schedule, but you got to win as many as you can going into your own conference game, and especially when you're in the best conference in college football, that's tough. In Tennessee, they don't have too easy of a schedule. I mean, it is a little difficult. They do got the two best teams in Alabama and Georgia on their schedule, but after that, their next toughest game would be that Oklahoma game in Norman. And I think they can go in there and get that win. And Tennessee, I think they'll be happy with a 9-3 record as well. Let's say they lose to Georgia, Alabama, and Arkansas or something, 9-3. There's a good chance they still get in because they're in the SEC with a tough schedule. 13 is going to be Utah. Utah, now this is the team with Cam Rising. I think this team can really win it all this year when it's all said and done. Their two toughest games are going to be Oklahoma State and Arizona, and that's week 4 and 5 of the playoff, of heading in the playoff, and then that's starting the conference play as well. So, really, really have it all laid out in front of them. The at Oklahoma State game, I think, will be very good and come down to the wire. But if Cam Rising is fully healthy, we saw what this Utah team can do when he is healthy and clicking. Utah, this is the year to buy in and go all in. 12 is going to be Florida State, and Florida State plays actually today against Georgia Tech in Ireland. But this team, man, they were so close last year, perfect, and then got left out of the playoff, and I'm sure they're still pissed about that. Hopefully it won't happen again this year, but they could be due for a Super Bowl hangover. Lost a lot of pieces. DJ Uiagalelei to have a monster year possibly, coming from Oregon State. At Clemson, he just wasn't that guy. Transferred to Oregon State for a year and really put a good season together, and now here he is back in the ACC. Playing for Florida State and hoping to lead this team to the promised land. But they got a tough schedule. I think it's going to be rough for them. I'm not saying they're going to be awful, but if they can go 10-2, it's going to be well earned with Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame, SMU, UNC, and Florida on the schedule. 6 of those 12 games right there already in a tough schedule. Florida State, good job last year, but it's all behind you now, and you got to put what you got in front of you. And Mike Norvell is really, really looking forward to a good bounce back year, if you would say. LSU comes in at 11, and they're playing the AP ranked 23rd team in the country, the USC Trojans in week one. This defense is going to have to carry the LSU team. I mean, their offense is going to be all right with Garrett Nussmeier, but he's got big shoes to fill after Jaden Daniels leaves to the NFL. Obviously, he won the Heisman as well last year. With the LSU, like I said, the defense is going to have to show up and show out all season long. Their toughest game probably, I mean, at Texas A&M is going to always be a tough game, but they got Ole Miss at home, and Oklahoma at home as well at the end of the year. So it's favorable against the teams they play because they are at home, but you never know, and LSU could get tripped up anywhere along the line. Talking about getting tripped up, we got Notre Dame, and that game at week one, like I said about Texas A&M, is just as tough for Notre Dame, but even tougher because they're going on the road and they got a transfer quarterback starting week one in Riley Leonard. You know, he was great at Duke, but he has big expectations to take this team to the playoff because we thought Sam Hartman was going to be that person to take it to another level, but he just couldn't get it done. And you know, this team, because they are an independent team, Notre Dame, they could only get in the playoff as a 5 seed, 5 or 12 seed because they aren't a conference champion. So it is a little harder for Notre Dame to get in technically because there's not as many spots open for them. But I expect Notre Dame to be right there when it's all said and done, probably around 10-2, and get in there as an independent around a 10, 11, or 12 seed. Just because their schedule is fairly easy. You know, this game against Texas A&M is one of their two toughest schedule games this year. And if they get that done, go on the road in College Station, we might see Notre Dame not fall out of the top 10 for the rest of the year. At 9, you got Missouri, and I love this Missouri team heading into the year. Missouri being a lot, I think they're gonna, probably be around the same record that they were last year. Their schedule, very easy first 4 games. Then they got to bye and go on the road to College Station, Texas A&M. Then after that, their toughest game is in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. Then their last 4 games, I wouldn't say are a cakewalk, but it's definitely against the middle to lower end teams in the SEC. And as long as you got Brady Cook there and he's healthy, I think this Missouri team can really make a run. 8 is Penn State, and we don't need to talk about any of their players or their schedule or anything. We just need to talk about how they can not be 10-2 and actually win a big game. Their problem is winning a big game, whether it's at home or on the road. And week one at West Virginia is going to be no joke. That's going to be a tough, tough place to play. I think they will go in there and get that win, but at what cost? I think Drew Aller needs to really step up this year and be accurate in those big games. You know, they have at Ohio State, at USC, and then at Wisconsin this year. So 3 of their toughest games are all on the road, and he's going to have to step up. And I think at least 2 of those 3 for this State team to be really considered to be a playoff team because, James Franklin, obviously he's a great coach, but he just can't win those big games. And if you can't win those big games, why would we put you in the playoffs? 7 is Alabama. Obviously, their big storyline, losing Nick Saban to College game day. And Kalen DeBoer, the Washington head coach last year, coming in to take Saban's spot. He's got tough shoes to fill, but man, does he have a roster to possibly get them back to the promised land. Jalen Milroe comes back, and he is looking to really solidify himself as a top quarterback in college football. You know, last year they didn't know who to start, but they finally went with Milroe. And since they went with Milroe, this team was awesome until obviously that Rose Bowl game against Michigan. But man, does Alabama have a tough schedule. They are at Wisconsin in week 3. And then you open your first SEC game with Georgia at home, and then Vanderbilt, South Carolina should take care of them. But then you go on the road, face Tennessee in Knoxville. Then you get Missouri at home, bye week at LSU, your cupcake game, and then at Norman against Oklahoma. And then obviously you got the Iron Bowl the last week of the season, and that's a great game no matter how good each team is. So Alabama, they definitely have their work cut out for them. But I do see Alabama probably getting around 10 wins this year, just because, it's Alabama. It's not like the wheels are falling off already in year one. So the expectations are high, but I think DeBoer can really live up to those expectations. At 6, you got my Michigan Wolverines. And I couldn't put them any higher. I just couldn't with all that they lost on offense. Pretty much everything except Donovan Edwards. And obviously, talking about Donovan Edwards, now that Corum is gone, I think Donovan Edwards is going to have a huge year now that he's going to be the lead back and the workhorse for Michigan. They do have some good backups though in Mullins. I think he can be the new Donovan Edwards role, but the starting quarterback is still undetermined with 1 week away. Is it gonna be Alex Orji or is it gonna be Tuttle? I think it's probably gonna be Orji just because he's been there, he's been playing more in the McCarthy system under Harbaugh and Sharon Moore. I think this team can really do really well. Obviously, their schedule is very cupcake for the first week, and then they get Texas at home week two. What happens if they win that game at Tech or against Texas at home? I think a lot of people are going to be turning their heads and saying this Michigan team isn't going down without a fight, and they're going to be pretty solid. And if they get that win, great. I think momentum's going to be at an all-time high and carry them through, probably half of the year. But if they lose that game, I'm sure they're going to have a lot to prove. They're not out of it like you used to be in the playoff. It feels like if you lose once, you're out of it. But nowadays, two, three losses, anything more than three losses, you're probably out of the consideration. But Michigan, I expect some big things for him. Obviously, he's a Michigan fan, but I don't think they're going to be as bad as people think. Their over under win totals 9.5, and I think they're going to get that over probably around 10 wins. Ole Miss comes in at five, starting my top five, and this team's biggest storyline this year, they lost Quinshon Judkins to Ohio State, but they still got Jackson Dart, and as long as he's there, this team could be really good under Lane Kiffin. I think Ole Miss has, very, very good chance to get to the SEC championship. And I say that because if you look at their schedule, they don't really play any tough team until October 12th, which is going to be week 7 at LSU in Baton Rouge. Other than that, I'm looking Georgia at home. And then really that's it. Georgia at home is going to be their toughest game besides that LSU game. So 10-2, let's say they lose both but win all the others. 10-2, I think you got to put this team in the playoff. At 4, you got Ohio State, 1A, 1B, whatever you want to call them, in the Big Ten favorites. This Ohio State team reloaded at quarterback and a running back. That running back duo of Quinshon Judkins and Henderson are going to be one of the best, if not the best, in the nation. Just because we know how Ohio State loves to run the ball. And now that they finally have a quarterback and Will Howard, the pressure's on him really to lead this team to the promised land. And, if Ryan Day, let's say they go 11-1, Ohio State, they go 11-1, and they lose to Michigan at the end of the year, might get a chance to redeem themselves in the Big Ten championship at the end, literally in 2 weeks after that, just because, the new system and how everything is in play. But Ryan Day's got to beat Michigan. I think that's all Ohio State fans care about at this point right now. It's in Columbus. It's right there for it. And if not, I think the writing's on the wall, and Ohio State might be looking for a new head coach next year. At 3, you got Texas. And this team is already off to a rough start. They lost 2 of their running backs to injury this year, with Baxter obviously being one of those guys. Then obviously you lost Jonathan Brooks to the NFL. So the running back situation is a problem for Texas heading into the year, but I don't think it's going to bother them too much in week 1, where week 2 it might against Michigan, like I said. But Quinn Ewers coming back. Obviously he's exceptional, probably top 3 quarterback in college football, but they got a tough schedule. I think UGA, Michigan, obviously the Red River rivalry in Oklahoma, and then at Texas A&M, it's going to be tough for them. They could, possibly fall and miss the playoff. I'm not saying they're gonna, but it's definitely possible with that schedule that they have. The out of conference besides Michigan's super easy. And last week of the year, I think at College Station, the Texas A&M game could be the game that really decides if Texas is going to get into the playoff. Week 2, you got Oregon. And man, as a Michigan fan joining the Big Ten, not loving it, but I love that Oregon is reloading immediately after they lose pretty much their whole roster to the NFL. Bo Nix is gone, Bucky Irving's gone, Troy Franklin's gone. Your top 3 playmakers on offense are gone. So what do? You go get Dylan Gabriel out of Oklahoma, out of UCF as well. And he's probably a top 5 quarterback. And under him, I think they're going to just be slinging the rock all around. Oregon, though, they do have a very easy Big Ten schedule till week 7, where they get Ohio State at home. And then their toughest game is going to be on the road at Michigan, and then at Wisconsin late in the year will be a tough one. Camp Randall will be rocking. But I expect Oregon to be really good, and I think they're going to make the playoff. It's just going to be whether they win the Big Ten and get one of those top four buys, or they're going to be one of those top teams on the outside. And obviously, at number one, I gotta have Georgia. Georgia, this team didn't lose a lot, um, at least where it matters, in my opinion, with Carson Beck in that quarterback position. Carson Beck is going to be awesome this year. Obviously the SEC championship, losing to Bama, missing the playoff. I'm I'm sure Georgia fans are still pissed off about that. And week one against Clemson, this is your time to come out and prove it and just throttle them. I think it's going to happen, in all honesty. I do. I think Georgia's just going to take care of business, and it's not going to be that close of a game heading into the fourth quarter. But if you look at this Georgia schedule, toughest game probably on the road at Alabama, or at Texas, or at Ole Miss, just based on, the road situations. But they do have Tennessee at home, uh, and then obviously the Florida Georgia game in Jacksonville. But Georgia definitely has their work cut out for them because they have, like I said, at Alabama, at Texas, and at Ole Miss. You just saw those are the other top three teams in the SEC, and they're all on Georgia's schedule. So I'm not saying they're going to go 3-0 in those games. I think they could go maybe 2-1. If they go 2-1 in those, Georgia's probably going to walk away with a college football playoff berth when they're just going to be like Oregon. If they win the SEC, they're going to be one of those top four teams and probably number one. That's going to be it for my preseason rankings. Check back next week or in 2 weeks, actually, to see where your team ranks after all the week one games. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.